Great. We are all in. Um, more than 20 people are here right now, and hopefully more of you can also join us. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this open class, the Henley Open Class, which is part of our Job Reset Fest. Now, on this class, you're going to get the experience of what a typical MBA class feels like. And I've got to let you know, right, that as a former MBA student, you can trust me, there is nothing typical about about a Hindi class, simply because it's just fun, it's challenging, but most of all, it's enlightening. I was talking to a friend just earlier on this year, actually, which is probably like a few months ago, and just kind of saying to them that the amazing thing about the MBA is that I obviously went there thinking that I was coming there to get some sort of a certificate to kind of get somewhere in life, and but the amazing thing is that after every single class that I had sitting with our lecturers, I felt that, wow, I was kind of ready to go out there and to do something great in the world. So I know that some of you who are here are trying to see and decide whether this is where you want to come, whether Henley is going to be a home for the MBA class. But regardless, whether it happens, whether it doesn't happen, but obviously would like for it to happen, is that when you leave today, you're going to be feeling inspired. You're going to be feeling like what you're going to be learning today from Professor Kevin Money is going to kind of help you, because this is at the end of the day called Job Reset, about you looking at yourself and growing into other avenues. I started off in the music industry, which I still am involved, but obviously because of COVID reasons, we haven't been able to share the stage as much as we've wanted to. But I've also got to say that because of what I have been able to learn at Henley, I've been able to branch out and to kind of reset myself in the job space. Right now, I'm the channel director for TBN Africa. Kind of sitting there running stuff, and really because of what I've learned. So the things that you learn from doing an MBA, they get you ready for whatever field you wanna go to. And most of us are over 40, and to think that you want to change jobs or even change careers at this time is impossible. A Job Reset is here to help you to be able to get all those tools that you need in order for you to do that. Now, I'm not sure whether John is with us. Oh, there's John. John Foster Pedley, who's the dean of Henley. John is here with us, and John is going to just share with you guys just a few words. And this is amazing. I've got to tell you, because in my 3 years at Henley, I did the PG dip as well. John was around, and I've always thought that if someone is the dean of a university, of an institution like Henley Business School, triple accredited, that you'll hardly ever see them. But that's the wonderful thing about Henley, is the fact that as much as obviously, some are students, some are staff, but at the end of the day, even if you're an alumni, you are family, and you're able to see your family on campus everywhere, even right now. And so it's wonderful to have you, John. Over to you.
Thanks, Louise. So I just love hearing your story, and you're doing so well.
Thank you.
And I'm sure nearly everybody knows how well Loiso sings as well. So it's just what a gift. But to be able to take that and to start moving it into building his own career, and then building an industry, transforming the creative industries, making opportunities available for so many people. And now, we have a mission. We build the people who build the businesses that build Africa. And Loiso doing so much work. I was actually, I remember what it was like to be 40 just, and and it does seem so old, doesn't it? Like that's the end of everything. Oh, my life is past. But it's just so not the case. You can do so much more. And if you kind of have a bit of a vision about what you want to do and you want to make a difference, then it just gets so you just get more and more capability. You learn more and more about moving towards the directions you want to do. As long as you don't sort of get so obsessed with having, of being successful all the time. If you're pushing a movement forward, you're going to go up, you're going to go down. Sometimes you're going to fail, but all the time you're pushing the boundaries out a little bit for the people behind you. So thanks, Louise. And really wonderful to see so many other people here as well. I mean, I know Kevin really well. Kevin came from South Africa, but he's been living in the UK for a long time. I'm sure Kevin's a surfer chap, really. He's from Durban originally, but a wonderful, wonderful man and a great teacher. A lot of my colleagues here. I see Annabella and Mamo and Graham and many more. So thank you very much for setting this up. I'm looking forward to seeing more. So let me tell you a little bit, if I may, about MBAs, etc. So I know it's difficult if you're thinking of doing an MBA to choose which one. I mean, we as a matter of principle never compete with anybody. There's some lovely business schools in South Africa. I worked at one, UCT, for 15 years. Gibbs is great. You know, I know Rhodes. I'm the vice chair of the South African Business Schools Association. So we try and bring all the business schools together towards a purpose, which is getting education out into South Africa. And I think it's just ridiculous. There's so much need for education that's ridiculous to be narrowly competitive. We should help each other. So we've collaborated with other ones a lot, and we love doing that. And people flow from one business school to the other. But what I want to say, why people come to Henley, for example, and I think there's several reasons that make some people want to choose us. I hope it's because we really, really care. I know when I did my MBA at a place called Ashridge in the UK many years ago, they had a chief executive and dean called Philip Sadler, who's written a number of books. And Philip was this great tall guy, and these beautiful grounds around Ashridge. It was a sort of National Trust grounds. It was a beautiful place. But Philip used to stalk around these grounds and just walk around. Doesn't matter who you were and what you were doing. If he came past you, he would stop and he'd say, "Hey, how are you?" He'd have this really genuine conversation, because Philip was like that. He cared about people. And I think that's the thing about educating. You're not doing it, you're not doing it for anything except because you truly believe in it. And after a while, when you're in education, you look at people, and you've seen so many people like Loyiso and so many others grow. I mean, even in Henley, every person at Henley who works there gets free education at any level all the time. So, they go from our level 5 program right up to do MBAs. We give it to them free, but they're expected to take it. So the people you look around from Henley are all studying in one way or another, or about to. And that's the way we like to have it. Ellie, for example, she's got 2 master's degrees and 1 sort of cum laude. And it's so quiet and humble, you'd never imagine that, but so capable. So when you're in education, you look at people and you think of yourself and you remember what the struggle was like, and you just know what people can do, even if they don't see it themselves. You know how smart people are. We don't know how smart we are most of the time. And it's not like being show-off smart. It's just we have a wonderful brain and emotions. We just have a wonderful sort of capability. And what happened in South Africa and many other countries, I think that because of the toxicities of the past, people stopped believing, or even believing in themselves, or how wonderful they are. And the truth is that our MBA students at Henley, who are 75% Black Africans and about 55% women, they are examined internationally by people like Kevin and his pals over in the UK. They don't know who's who, and they examine them, they mark them with the Germans, with the Danes, with the Finns, with the Brits, with maybe the Malaysians and the Maltese. And the South African students who are blind assessed do as well, if not better, in those exams than all those people in the world. So I think it's time we stop thinking, oh, we want to be as good as that. Forget that. We've just got to start believing in ourselves. And that's a really big thing about education. I think the one thing that Henley does is we really do believe, we really want the people to succeed. We also believe in flexible and family-friendly education. I see absolutely no reason why, if you're studying, your relationships or your children should suffer and they should put on the back pocket. We live our lives in our relationships and families, and we all know how hard that is. I certainly do. It's a constant battle. I mean, I've been married 18 years now, and I'm learning all the time. And there's just another thing I have to understand about parenting or whatever it is with the kids and my partner. So I think that's another thing. We need to learn to move with the people. So our family-friendly programs bring partners in, and even families and children in, and we have sessions all the way through the MBA about how you can manage to study without disrupting your life in insane ways. And we bring in previous students and partners to say what strategies they've built, and we have really great sessions on tech-savvy parenting or dealing with complex problems, etc. So that's a couple of things that matter. Another thing that really matters about Henley, I think, is that we are truly international. Henley is the oldest business school in Europe. It's internationally triple accredited. It's part of the University of Reading. It's got some great academics who are publishing. And I have to tell you that Professor Kevin Money is one of the best. He's so humble. He'll never say so, but he really is great. And his material is wonderful. I mean, I love his stuff. So we are, you know, an established, very solid business school that's been in South Africa for coming on for 30 years now. Over the last 10 years, we've come from a small office of about 5 people to a big operation now with MBAs, with a whole series of programs, with a fantastic array of corporate clients. And MBA is a project, it's a passion of mine, where we try and turn the energies of a business school to social good. So we work with something like 350 NGOs, and Kevin's been involved in that. We have the largest scholarship program, a bursary program for any business school in Africa. And we particularly pick on people who are making a difference in life, or people who are running institutions like Welcome Bitboy, for example, who was in prison for a long time for gangsterism, but now is helping kids in the Cape Flats in that area to not go into a life of crime. And sports people like the Beast, he's now come through rugby, come through rugby in the World Cup, and now he wants to change his career, and he's now studying the PG Dip and then the MBA like Loiso did. And investigative journalists who put their life on the line, you know, to tell truth. We offer people like that scholarships so that they can go and build the foundations of democracy. But above all, I think people come because of our internationalism. We're truly international. We have an international MBA qualification. So yes, you get a South African qualification, but you also get an international qualification. You can graduate in the UK, and that makes you part of the what the economists have said is the #1 MBA alumni network of any business school in the world. And that's right. You look at the rankings, even those ones, for potential to network. So we have this sort of internationalism, this global touch, and it helps people feel part of the globe and helps people feel confident. And our job is not to you know, to be arrogant. Our job is to support you and get you to understand how smart you can be. Why don't you do a doctorate afterwards? Become a professor, become a CEO, start a movement, whatever it is, but make a difference in life. And that's what an MBA is really about. It's you know, masters of building Africa, you know, masters of business acumen, you know, making business artists, all different ways you can call MBA. And that's what you will be. And we want you to support and believe in yourself. And our job is to make sure you've passed if we can. But the thing is, because it's international, it's one of the highest standards in the world. We'll never change that. We get you to that standard. We don't lower the standard. When you finish the Henley MBA, you know for sure that you're at a global standard. Anyway, I've waffled on far too long. I'm really thank you so much for coming here today, and I look forward to the sessions. And Kevin, hi, and to you, thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming, and I hope you really enjoy today. And please reach out to us. You know, we're on social media. I'm available always, of course, and so is everybody else. We love to talk to people and support you. Thank you. Larissa, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, John. I love that phrase, you know, what Henley stands for. We build the people who build the businesses who build Africa. And I've got to say, you know, because we're about to sit in a class now, that when I was sitting in the classes, you know, I always thought that I was coming just to make sure that I just passed my assignments and that I just passed my my exams and obviously finished the dissertation. But it's amazing because you get so much from these classes that it's more than just passing. You know, they always say that you'll probably only ever need 20% of what you're getting in class for your assignments, because it's not about that. It's about building you so that you can build the businesses, so that you can build Africa, you know. And thank you very much, you know, just to you once again for just coming to join us. Awesome stuff. Well, we're gonna move on now because it is nearly time. Yes, John. Sorry, you were saying something.
I say it's a privilege. I'm looking forward to the lecture. You know, I never get to sit in Kevin's classes, and you know, he really knows. He really is a very, very good teacher. Kevin, I'm just setting off. I'm sorry, but it's true. I have to tell you. So I really hope you enjoyed it. The material Kevin talks about is actually enormously useful these days. So you know, it's just a really good thing. I'm looking forward to it myself.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, me too as well. I
very
actually
good.
had the opportunity to sit with Kevin in the class for reputation. It was called RR. And it was about reputation, and that's what you guys are going to be getting into today. It's best practice in corporate reputation and stakeholder management. But I know that Kevin is going to touch on yourself as well, because this class, it deals about values, it deals about the mission statements, and this is not only just for businesses, but it's also for ourselves. When I look at myself, I always say, am I living to my values? The things that I say about who I am, do my actions actually say the same? Because sometimes you can say, there's no real good or bad. It's just that you've got to live up to the bad person that you are, or you've got to live up to the good person that you say that you are. So without any further ado, I do want to introduce Kevin, and just to give you guys just a quick sort of idea of who Kevin is, but I'm sure that it's going to give you, just some more info as well about who he is. So what I found is that Kevin Money is the director of the John Madejski, excuse me, Kevin, if I totally botched that, Center for Reputation within the School of Marketing and Reputation at Henley Business School. Kevin is a chartered psychologist and former editor of the Journal of General Management and Manager Update. He's also a director of several organizations, including the Positive Psychology Forum, iSalon, and Edutain. And John mentioned earlier on just how humble Kevin is. And I've got to say, Kevin asked, we were like, Professor Kevin. He was like, listen, just call me Kevin. And that's how he carries himself, as really just one of us. But for someone who knows so much about reputation, yeah, if luckily you're not me, Kevin, because I'll be carrying that professor everywhere that I go. So let me not waste any time. Let me get Kevin on. Welcome to class. Welcome to class. This is going to be amazing. This is going to be great. I'm definitely going to be listening in and watching you, Kevin.
Great, thanks, Louisa, and hi, John. It's nice to see. I count Louisa and John as friends, and it's such nice. It's funny here in the UK. It's 2 hours earlier, right? So you'll probably see in the corner it's just getting light. So I was in the room listening to this, and I've got to say to you, so it was uplifting to listen to you. I was thinking, how did you guys get me to agree to this lecture? And then tell me it's 7 o'clock in the morning, right? Afterward. Anyway, I'm joking, but it's nice to see all of you guys, and it's I'm looking forward to the class. And I also really liked your introduction about, there's no typical class, right? Because as you said, oh, it's going to be a typical MBA. There is no typical class because everyone's different. Everyone does something different. But I think one thing which, maybe brings all of the different things together is this idea that we want to co-create, we want to interact. And so throughout today, for the next hour and a half or however long I'm with you, we are going to be asking you to, break out into rooms, have a discussion, come back in, interact with us, because I think that's the way in which, you learn the best. I remember seeing a piece of research from London Business School about how people learn. And one of the things that came out is, people remember about 5% of what they hear in a lecture, and they remember about 30% of what they discuss with each other. And ironically, they remember about 95% of what they teach, right? So today we want to interact, because I think, especially in the online world, it's easy to have just something on in the background, your cell phone, silent, camera off, and what is actually happening. So I think we are going to ask you to interact. We are going to ask you to connect in with other people. And that's one of the key things about the next hour. There are going to be times, and we hope you will have time to speak to other people and engage. And I've got a couple of, 5-10 minute exercises where we'll ask you to do something, and we'll come back in. So welcome to everyone. I'm not sure exactly how many people are in the room. Lewis, so do you know how many people we have in the room?
At the moment, we've got about 28, nearly 30 people in the room.
Okay, good, brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, and you can feel free to turn yourself off if I picked on you at the wrong moment there. You suddenly turn yourself off and ask your question. So, okay, so about 30 people. So, when we break out into smaller rooms, I'm going to ask the technical people just to randomly break people out into rooms of about 5 people. That would be great. Okay, so I'm going to have a go at sharing my screen. And let's see if it actually works. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, I'm gonna share my slides. Is that coming through for everyone? People can see this, I hope. Okay, let me put this on to full. Okay, all right, so I hope people
can see it.
You can see it. Okay, that's great. So I think, you know, for me, we've got about an hour and 15 minutes together. And I just thought it would be useful just to set the scene. So Louisa spoke about, and John spoke about, reputation, brand management, stakeholder management. In all of this, I'm going to bring it back to you as well as a person, because I think, you know, it was interesting to me to talk to Louisa about, you know, his experience on the MBA. And one thing that, you know, uplifted me when we chatted about this last week was, you know, the fact that the workshop that we'd done around values and reputation had been able to influence Louisa in his organization in terms of saying, hey, if we can reset our values, if we can really know what they are, if we can have them close to us, we can make better decisions. We can be clearer about who we want to be, who we don't want to be. And I think there's an element of that in our personal lives as well. If we can actually think about labeling some of the things which are often very unconscious. So I think often, you know, values are very unconscious. And part of the process that we think about in reputation management is this idea that we can be more clear in articulating who we are, either as a person or as an organization, to others. And in articulating better who we are, we can connect better to people who are similar to us, or we want to connect to, on issues that are important to them. So that's the thinking behind the module. So in the next sort of hour, some of the things we'll cover. So, you know, what is reputation? How would you define it? How is it different from or similar to other concepts that are out there that are, you know, about branding, and often people talk about quite a lot? You know, what is a reputation management process? So, and you'll see that third question, and it's a bit of a rhetorical question. Is there a reputation management process? Of course there is, and I'm going to tell you all about it. But I thought I'd start with a more open question. We will spend a bit of the session looking at values, personal values, corporate values, how they link to reputation, and just, you know, get you as a group to reflect on some of that as well. And, you know, then how does reputation and, you know, values link to strategy? And that's really where a lot of our work has made impact in the world, is where we connect these things that might be quite soft, like values, like reputation, to things which are harder, things about strategy and engagement. So that's the process for the workshop. And I wanted to get you into your random teams quite quickly, also to give you an experience of you know, the MBA and you know, the fact that we want it to be interactive. I will feed off what you bring me, and I will do the same thing in the class when we teach the reputation and responsibility module at Henley. The one thing that we ask people to do is, through the 2-day workshop, to reflect on a reputation issue that's important to them as a group or an organization, and to work on that. And it's been amazing working in South Africa in terms of some of the examples. You know, people have worked on, hey, you know, if we were going to advise the ANC on their reputation, what would we do? And they go through the process. Or if we're going to advise, you know, Eskom, or if we're going to, you know, advise organizations that are doing really well, organizations, you know, like Unilever, who are doing fantastically around the world. So we ask you to reflect on things that mean something to you. And today, I think the unit of analysis is going to be you, right? I think we don't have time to go into big companies. We can reflect on your personal experience of them, but we're really going to focus on you. So where we're going to start then is, I was going to ask the person who's in charge of the breakout rooms to give if we could break out into, you know, random groups of 5, and you know, in those groups of 5, I'm going to give you 10 minutes, because you still need to introduce yourselves to each other and say who you are, and you know, if you can just introduce yourselves to each other in the groups of 5 to then say, what do you think is reputation and how is it different from brand? And then in 10 minutes or so, I'm going to bring all the groups back together. Well, I'm not going to do it. The technical people are going to do it. And, we're going to have this discussion around, how would you define reputation? How do you think it's different from brand? So just to be clear again, breakout groups of 5 people, 10 minutes or so. Briefly introduce yourselves to the other people in your breakout room and your reflections on what is reputation and how is it different from brand. Okay, so the technical people could do that for us. I will look forward to coming back in about 10 minutes. Okay, welcome back, everybody. It was great. I was actually in a breakout room myself, so it's good to see everybody and to be part of the chat. So I'm just wondering if, and I hear from John Foster-Pedley, there's been this bit of load shedding this morning, so I know some people are finding it difficult to connect in. But I was just wondering if there is anybody who wanted just to share some of the insights from their group, from their little group discussion around, what is reputation, how is it different from brand, and we can then pick things up from that as well.
Okay, I don't mind sharing. I'm from group 3, Louise, and basically we summed it up into 2 very short phrases, and we sort of said that reputation is how people perceive you, and then brand is how you want people to see you. Great,
fantastic. And what were the thoughts on what that actually might mean in practice?
Okay, we had a couple of nice comments from like, for example, Michelle felt that the 2 are actually really intertwined in your organization. Are you honest? Do you treat your customers fairly with regards to being a brand? Spiwe said that he felt that it's got that your reputation's got a lot to do with how much good that you put out there. He works in an IT environment, with regards to keeping information private, and that it could impact negatively on a brand, if there was any leaks and stuff like that. But yeah, we all clearly decided that, at the end of the conversation, even with also losing touch with the load shedding and bad Wi-Fi at the moment, but yeah, that reputation is how people perceive you, and that brand is how you want people to see you. We just sort of, summed it up into those very 2 short lines.
Brilliant, Louise. And you're going to be in demand from the Henley team, because you'll be happy to know you guys got it spot on. Okay, so this is exactly exactly. This is exactly the way in which academia defines it. So often in academia, you talk about reputations as being how other people perceive you. So the issue there with reputation, if you think about it as a perception, reputation is in everybody's heads. So the outcome of that very much is that reputation is something which is beyond your direct control. As much as we would love you to think Henley is an amazing organization and is cutting edge and caring, these are all aspects that might be in our reputation. They're beyond our direct control. We can influence them through your experiences of us today, or just for me this morning, the way Luisa came in with that energy, just this positive energy, was like, wow, okay, that's great. This sets the tone. So we can do things that might influence the reputation, but reputation is beyond our direct control. And the irony is that reputation is just so valuable, because reputation's value lies in people's behaviors. If you think an organization's got a good reputation, you're more likely to buy their products. You're more likely to be committed to the work, to working, if you're working for them, if you're an employee. So reputation is hugely valuable, but it's beyond your direct control. Branding is a concept which is within the control of an organization. And branding, there's been a lot of money put into branding. because branding can be a verb. It can be something that we do, right? So it becomes something that an organization can control. And clearly there should be a link between branding and reputation, right? Because if you like, branding sets up expectations. Branding sets a whole set of promises out there, which, you know, link to what you might expect from an organization. And we know that our expectations define our disappointments. Okay, so if you think about creating a brand, if you create a brand with a certain set of promises, and you don't meet those promises, that leads to a spiral downwards in reputation. Whereas if you are making promises that you meet, those promises, you know, if you like, build reputation. So I think that the key thing here to recognize is that often people put a lot of, you know, money, and here's a brand, you know, into building a brand, but the value of a brand lies in how people feel about it, how they behave towards it. Okay, so it's, you will see in this whole reputation workshop that you know, what we want to do is almost connect the internal with the external. Okay, so we want to say that, you know, reputation is a perception of a character. The image of an organization is what's held externally. The identity of an organization is what is held internally, and reputation is the sum total of the parts. And one of the things that you'll see in a lot of the literature is that organizations that perform better have an alignment between their internal reputation, if you like, their identity, and their external reputation, how they're perceived. So there needs to be a connection between the two. And I think, you know, for me, one of the best ways to describe this is that, you know, if you have an organization which, you know, externally had a reputation for being caring and good and positive, and internally had an identity which was uncaring and wasn't as positive, you would see a situation where externally people would come in with a set of high expectations about an organization, and, you know, they think it would be caring, and they would meet an organization that wasn't. So it's a spiral downwards, as opposed to, you know, if the reputation internally was very positive in terms of, you know, being caring and an organization which was, if you like, cutting edge, and externally it was less positive, it would be a spiral upwards. So you'll see this important idea of alignment, and often it's about not necessarily you know, understanding whether or not you've got a good reputation or a bad reputation. Sometimes it's really about understanding where are those areas of alignment, because those areas of alignment are the ones you can leverage towards something positive, because that alignment is the touch point between the two organizations. In our group, we had a really good discussion about how it's important to get those touch points between what your brand says and the experiences of an organization, of stakeholders of your organization. Another question I often get is, you know, when we talk about alignment, is it better to have a good reputation internally? And, you know, clearly you want a good reputation internally and externally, but is it better to have a good reputation internally and a bad reputation externally, or would it be better to have a bad reputation internally and a good reputation externally? And, you know, the answer to that question is that, you know, if we think of this idea of a spiral of expectations, it's always better to have a good reputation internally, because that reputation internally will then, you know, if you think about it, if you've got a bad reputation internally and people have high expectations of you, they'll be very disappointed when they come into contact. There'll be a spiral downwards. Okay, so it's always, if you think about building reputation, it's about building reputation internally first and then externally. And you know, another thing which, you know, has really impressed me about Henley South Africa, you know, being in the UK and, you know, interacting with Henley South Africa, I had my call, my if you like, my, you know, in the nicest possible way, you know, training call, where I was, you know, had to make sure I was ready for the technology and could do the workshop properly. And I met a couple of people from Henley that I hadn't met before, and I was like, oh wow, these are, you know, great people. They're similar to the people that we've worked with before. So the people that we get shape our reputation. They shape what we are, and they shape your experience of us. So focusing on the internal becomes really, really important. And as I said, reputation on one level is a perception of character, but it's important. It's very important in as far as it drives behavior. So I remember, I'll give you a little example. You can have, reputation for so many different things, almost anything, but reputation is important if it drives people to support you, to buy your products, to be loyal. If you do something wrong, will they forgive you? Does it increase options? I mean, I remember we did a project with an NGO in London, and this NGO, many of you will, is part of the United Nations. And it was interesting to me to actually connect in to, the organization, because physically it was very, going to see the office was very, very small, right? It was a tiny little office, but I had, here's this organization, a representative of the United Nations. In my mind, the reputation of the organization was much bigger than it was physically. And it's interesting, that organization had so many options, so many people wanted to work with it. Because it was part of the United Nations, it could be that little bit smaller because people wanted to connect to something which was bigger. So reputation is a perception of character. Branding is what an organization can do. One of the things it can do to set expectations, to set, if you like, a promise to stakeholders. And the value of the reputation exists in how people behave back towards the organization. So I think, to me, thinking of those concepts, you might think on one level that, who cares really about what's the difference between brand and reputation? And I agree with that to a certain extent. Often lots of this is semantic sparring. What's the difference? Why would you define the difference between these different words? And, in my group, I said often us academics think about dancing on a pinhead. What's the difference between these two concepts? But really, if you can differentiate, what is it within your control and what is beyond your control? And if you can say, how can I use what's within my control to build my reputation, to make sure I get this alignment between external and internal? Is the brand really representative of who I am? So I think that's the other difference with reputation management. Often you think brand management, you say, hey, we're going to create a brand which has these sets of values and that stakeholders want. But reputation management is often about thinking about who you are. And leveraging that towards something positive, because it's a lot harder to change who you are. You can create a brand promise which doesn't fit with who you are, and it means you will disappoint stakeholders. So it's back to this idea of understanding very much who we are. Now, I wanted to throw in, this idea that rankings are not reputations, and the reason that I say that, and maybe John mentioned business school rankings, and I think it's a good place to start. I mean, we're at a workshop about you doing an MBA. One of the things that you want to look at is rankings. And so, why would I say rankings are not reputation? So I think that the key thing when you think about a ranking versus a reputation, there's an academic out there which talks about, someone called Llewellyn, who says you can have as many reputations as there are people in the world. So we care about, as individuals, so many different things, and we form reputations in many, many different ways. And I think, when you think about a ranking has a defined set of criteria. Things like an organization with a good reputation would have good use of assets, good, capacity to innovate. All of these criteria mean something to somebody, but they might not mean something specifically to you. Okay. And all of these rankings are also defined in terms of a particular group. So if you think of the MBA rankings, the Financial Times ranking, that, is done by sending business schools and we have our rankings department in Henley, sending business schools a form to fill in, which asks about, the number of articles which have been published in internationally recognized journals, the number of international, by which they mean non-UK faculty that we've got. And they ask a lot of specific questions of us, which then place us in a position within the rankings. Now, the Financial Times ranking, I think, is good. It's solid, but it's a particular view. It's the view of the Financial Times about what makes a good business school. And it's also a view from the point of view of the data provided by Henley. Now, on one level, that's okay. But then, John mentioned The Economist. Now, The Economist challenged the whole idea of the Financial Times ranking and said, hey, you shouldn't be asking business schools to essentially rate themselves. There's a much more important group out there, and you should go to MBA students, former MBA students. And actually, so the Economist ranking goes to people who have done an MBA, and they fill in a questionnaire about, how was the quality of the students on your course? How has your salary changed between doing the MBA and not? And so their view at The Economist was that you'd have a much better view of Henley if you did it from the perspective of our customers. And, in the first year of doing that ranking, Henley came number 9 in the world, one above Harvard, which was amazing. But that ranking can also be criticized, because some people would say, hey, you shouldn't ask, MBA students, because they have a vested interest. They could say their organization is better than it is because they want to, do well in the job market. And, that led people like the Wall Street Journal to create an MBA ranking which looked at employers and said, hey, which are the MBA students which add most value? And again, that came up with a different list and a different bias, because maybe organizations are hiring MBA students who are slightly cheaper to hire. So I think, I'd invite you, whenever you look at rankings, whenever you look at reputation, you really need to ask yourself 3 key questions. And, earlier on, I spoke about remembering 5% of a lecture, right? So here's the 5%. If you want to remember anything about this lecture, here's the 5%. So the 3 important questions you need to ask yourself when you're managing reputation is, reputation with whom? Who do you want to have a reputation with? The second question, what do you want to have a reputation for? And the third question is reputation for what purpose? Why do you want to have a good reputation? And, in managing reputation, it's important to look at those 3 questions and how those 3 questions interact, right? Who do you want to have a reputation with? What do you want to have a reputation for? And what's the purpose of the reputation? So maybe I'll give you a little humorous example of this, okay? And it's links into I teach the MBA all over the world. I teach it in Henley, I teach it in Denmark, Finland, Germany, the UK, even sometimes I teach it in the UK. And, in my workshops, I often use myself as an example. So I'm going to use a little humorous example, a true story. And so essentially, I had the slide up in my class in Denmark, and I said to people, I could have a reputation as Kevin as, being tall or short, and it doesn't really matter, does it? I just used that as a flippant example. I thought, okay, here I am as an academic. I'm going to, throw that out and say, hey, you could be a reputation for tall, short, whatever. It doesn't matter. And one of the people in the class stuck up her hand, and she said to me, well, it does matter if you want to go dancing. And of course, I thought, okay, here I am in Denmark, who are as a nation very tall, and this woman who's put up her hand is probably taller than me, and she's probably telling me, you don't have a chance of going dancing with me, right? So if my purpose had been to find a dancing partner, and she was a representative sample of, and I wanted to go dancing with a woman, and she was a representative sample of the women in Denmark, then that would matter to my purpose. Okay, so if you got reputation with whom, if it was looking for women to dance with, a reputation for being tall or short would influence the outcome, which might be to go dancing. Clearly, in my mind, I was thinking it wouldn't matter to me as someone delivering the lecture. So I think, when you think of these three questions, that they really, really are important, because they help us define the type of reputation that we want. I work a lot with a guy called Steve Payne at Unilever, helping Unilever develop their sustainable living plan, and how they communicate about it in particular. And, one of the things Steve Payne always says to me when we start a project, he always says, Kevin, what are we trying to cause? What's the outcome that we want? Do we want people to buy more of our products? Or do we want people to use our products in a more sustainable way? So I think, you'll see, there's a lot of talk about, washing powder and how people might use it. And there's a whole movement to washing powders that, can clean clothes when you use water which is colder, water which is about 30 degrees as opposed to 60 degrees. But the big question is then, how do you get people to change their behavior when they've been using the same cycle on their washing machine for 20 years? Okay, so this question of reputation with whom, for what, and for what purpose is absolutely key to understanding reputation management. And often I find in big organizations, you find that I think it is as Henry Kissinger's speechwriter came up with the term, the urgent always takes the place of the important. And often what I find is that organizations put the most effort to where there is a lot of noise, without necessarily talking about or thinking about, well, who do we really want to have a reputation with? What do we really want to have a reputation for? And what's the purpose? Maybe another little example I'll give you is I do quite a lot of consulting work for an organization called Fugro. Now, some of you, probably most of you, have never heard of Fugro. But Fugro are the world's biggest seismic geology company. So they go around the world helping organizations, they might be big cities, scanning underneath the streets of the cities, looking for potential potholes, looking for different, issues within the city that they can spot with their seismic geology equipment before they actually become issues. They help mining companies, oil companies, to look for oil. They help, if there's a crash, if there's an airline crash, they help to search for the different things out there. So they're a huge company. And sometimes, the people at Fugro have said to me, Kevin, is it bad that people don't know us, And I keep saying, think of those three questions: reputation with whom, for what, and for what purpose. The people who know about seismic geology, the people who really, the governments around the world, the big mining companies around the world know Fugro, and they know that you're the best. And in many ways, that's the best place for you to be, because you're out of the public eye. If those organizations are doing things which are contentious, it's often not you which is, challenged. So in terms of reputation with whom, for what, and for what purpose, you want to have a good reputation with the people who are potentially your customers, and you want them to choose you. And I think that's the key thing here is, who do you want to have a reputation with, and why? What do you want to be famous for? I think, the other little example I use in that space, and I'll throw it out there because we've got Loiso, who is a musician on the call. I remember looking at don't judge me, a Britney Spears album. And there was a little note, and these are in the days you still could have an album. There's a note on the back of the album which said, to Diane Warren, thank you, we finally got one. And I was like, okay, for me, this was really insightful. But, I was thinking actually many other people wouldn't know that Diane Warren is one of the most successful songwriters of all time. She's written songs for everyone from, Bon Jovi to Cher to Britney Spears. But no one would know her, but the people who would need to know her do. And I think there's this idea that reputation is about being famous with everyone. It's not. It's really about thinking through these questions: reputation with whom, reputation for what, and reputation for what purpose. Okay, so that's the key to it. And if there's nothing else you remember from this lecture, think through for yourself. If this is a job reset fest, you know, who do I want to have a reputation with? What do I want to have a reputation for? And what's the purpose? What's the outcome that I want to have? And if you can think through those things, I think you can position yourself either as an organization or as a person in a more coherent way, and you're less stressed, I think, about, you know, should I be famous for everything? Should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? So thinking through these three questions, I think, becomes really, really important. Clearly, you know, if you're a big organization, one of the ways we differentiate reputation as a subject from the other subjects on the MBA is that it's a multi-stakeholder subject. So, you know, you have to at the same time keep your customers, your employees, your suppliers, your shareholders all happy at the same time. And often these stakeholders have competing and different needs. So it's thinking about how can you have a reputation which simultaneously attracts these multiple stakeholders and keeps them happy when they have competing needs. And it's what makes reputation then a strategic subject, and a subject which brings together marketing, HR, and you know, becomes something which is at a board level. And a lot of our work has gone to influence this idea of having a corporate dashboard, which is, you know, a stakeholder dashboard that links into these different stakeholders. And you know, organizations, you know, that we're currently working with on that, as you know, we're very interested in helping our National Health Service here in the UK, you know, even, you know, in light of COVID, balance these competing needs of different stakeholders in how they relate to stakeholders. So we move beyond this idea that reputation is just a perception, to this idea that reputation is important in relationships, and we need to relate to different stakeholders. So this with whom, for what, and for what purpose becomes something which is really important. Okay, so you know, we had the slide about the point about a reputation management process, and so I was just going to outline one for you here in terms of you know, a 6-stage process, and I was going to do it in relation to you know, how you might, you know, give an example of how this process might work. And I was going to do it in relation to an organization which some of you will know, most of you will know. Everyone in South Africa will know an organization called Woolworths. Woolworths is an organization which, you know, historically has strong links to an organization in the UK called Marks and Spencer. You will still find the same products in both of those stores. And you know, a friend of mine who lives in Henley, a guy called Mike Barry, up until recently was the head of Marks and Spencer's sustainability program, a program, you know, called Plan A, because, you know, Plan A because there's no Plan B. And Mike is a great thinker, and I think, you know, what I can do, you know, with this model is, you know, use his example of, you know, how he and Marks and Spencer, you know, would engage in a process similar to this, and how their sort of engagement process led them to a certain position. So if I think of the issue, scoping an issue, you know, what the issue that Marks and Spencer looked at was this issue of sustainable consumption of plastic waste, of the environment, an issue that many supermarkets and you know, retailers were looking at. And you know, they came to the conclusion that this, you know, doing something about, you know, plastic waste, about sustainability was important. And so they thought that was the big issue. Stage 2, they looked at their values, and they looked at the values of Marks and Spencer and thought, yes, our values say that we should be doing a lot of good things. We should be behaving sustainably towards the planet. So in reputation management, there's always this balance between how far are you going to be values led? Are you going to do what your values tell you to do? And so stage 2 said, yes, we should be doing these things, and we could be doing more, right? And so we're going to launch this thing called Plan A. At stage 3 of a reputation management process, there is some, you know, you essentially go to stakeholders and find out what stakeholders think. And it's interesting, you know, when Marks and Spencer's went to stakeholders, when they went to customers, when they went to employees, these customers and employees are saying, yes, you can. We want you to do more. We want you to do more about sustainability. We want you to do more about the environment. And then, if you look at stage 4, you identify the gaps between, what your values say you should be doing and what stakeholders say you should be doing. Now, we're not saying that it's always, values that are right, or always stakeholders that are right. There's sometimes a conflict between the two. I think maybe the most famous example is Henry Ford said, if you want to understand, if you've asked most of my customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. So he's given an example of, here's a visionary organization in which stakeholders didn't necessarily know what they want. But I think there's always a balance between, you don't want to tell your stakeholders what they need, because you might be perceived as arrogant as an organization. At the same time, sometimes your stakeholders might not perceive the issue with the depth that you do. So I think that was the example here in Marks and Spencer's, because when the supermarket asked their customers and employees what they wanted, they all spoke about plastic bags, packaging, and doing something about packaging. But if Marks and Spencer's, if what they were really thinking is, yes, plastic bags are important, but actually there are many other things which are just as important, which are about food miles. I was, in a supermarket not long ago, when we were allowed to go to supermarkets, and I remember picking up some asparagus and thought, well, this looks like nice asparagus. And then I was seeing, from Peru, and I'm thinking, wow, okay, this is flown all the way from Peru. So there's this idea that there's a lot of things that we can't see, like food miles, like the amount of food which is fed to animals and the creation of carbon dioxide. There's lots of things that we can't see that are really important to sustainability. And those are the things that Marks and Spencer's as a supermarket were looking at. Customers were looking at things that they could see and touch and feel. So those were the key gaps. So where did Marks and Spencer start? They started actually by taking strategic action to close the gaps on issues that were important to customers, right? They didn't say, oh, you silly customers, plastic bags are only a really small part of sustainability. They thought, actually, well, this is where customers start, and it is important. We're going to start there. So they were the first supermarket in Britain to introduce a 5p charge for a plastic bag. Before that was, I know that's been the law in South Africa for a long time, but the Marks and Spencer's did that before it was even the law. They introduced that, they measured and communicated, and importantly, they listened first to what their customers and employees wanted and said, hey, we're doing something about plastic bags. We've listened to you, and we're doing something about packaging, but at the same time, we're going to introduce a traffic light system on our products. So if you went to, and I don't think it's the case in Woolworths in South Africa. I know I saw Mike about 18 months ago. I saw him more recently, but I saw him 18 months ago. So when he was still at Marks and Spencer's, and he was going to head out to South Africa actually to visit Woolworths. So I don't know if it is the case for Woolworths in South Africa, but I know in the UK, what the way in which they've closed the gap between what stakeholders want and what their values said they should do is that they've essentially introduced a traffic light system on their products. So if you now go to Marks and Spencer's and you pick up some asparagus that is grown in the United Kingdom, it will have a green light on it, which says actually it hasn't traveled that far. But if you picked up some asparagus which has got a red light, it might be a red flag. This has actually got a big carbon footprint on it. So they've tried to make the things which are less tangible, more tangible through this packaging system, which essentially is this never-ending loop of linking together your values with stakeholder expectations. And then I think with Marks and Spencer's, and the best organizations changing expectations. Then you start to ask, well, why doesn't the other supermarket, why doesn't a Pick and Pay have a traffic light system on its products? So the best organizations in this space, I think, work with stakeholders. And I think the key message from me here is that they listen to stakeholders when it comes to understanding what is important to them, and they co-create a strategy. They don't start off by saying, hey, we're introducing a traffic light system. They start off by saying, hey, we've listened to you about packaging, and we know that many organizations lose the right to communicate because they haven't listened. And the best way you have got of getting someone to listen to you is to show them that you've listened to them, and I think that's we know that, from all of the work in everything from personal relationships, people who are in conflict with one another, family relationships, relationships between husbands and wives. I think we often start wanting to communicate. Hey, can I tell you what I think? Whereas the other person is just sitting there thinking, can you listen? And it's the same thing, I think, with our reputations. Marks and Spencer showed that they'd listened. They demonstrated in their reporting, hey, these are issues that customers care about. We're acting on packaging. Employees care about, we're acting on packaging, but we're also doing this, not just, hey, we're doing these other things. So I think this idea, this is a reputation management process, something which I think you can think about applying to your, organizational relationships, but also your personal relationships. And I think in all of this, a lot of the foundation links into values. You need to know at that stage too, you need to know who you are in relation to things. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to pause for a minute and just invite any questions before we go into our next sort of exercise, if we can. Anyone's got any questions of clarification, any comments from anyone in the group, please come through if you'd like to. Otherwise, I'll set you into another exercise. Okay, so I stunned silence, so that's okay. I'm gonna take that as a good sign. So what I'd like Graham to do now is, you saw at the stage 2 in this reputation management process that, understanding your values almost as is something which is very important. How far are you going to be values led? How are you going to be stakeholder led? And what I want you to do in your teams of 5 again is to just have a discussion, if you can, from your point of view. There's a lot about values, but what are values? What are they at a psychological level? What are there to, Louisa mentioned I'm a chartered psychologist. I'm very interested in a deep level. What are they at a very personal human level? What are values? And then if you have time to talk that through, what are corporate values? How are personal values, these deeply personal aspects, different or similar from corporate values? And again, I'm going to give you 10 minutes and then we're going to come back in, if that's possible, please. So Graham, if you could break us into those random groups, that would be really good. Thank you. Sorry, I realized I was on mute. Apologies, people. I was just saying thank you for everyone. We had a great discussion in our group, and I was going to invite anyone who would like to share what they discussed. We had a great discussion in our group, but anyone like to share what they thought values were?
Okay, I'm going to jump in again. Louise from group 3. I'm the spokesperson.
We love people like you on the online world. I've got to tell you, thank you.
Here we go.
Yep.
Okay, in our group,
Girl power.
We had a very interesting discussion, but at the end of the session, we basically felt that values are attributes, personal beliefs that we feel are important in life. We also discussed that they can be right and wrong. And then we felt that organizational values are values that are joint values that everyone believes in, that are shared by the group.
Mm-hmm. Great. And so I'm interested, just picking up on this, can be right or wrong. There was a nice tone in your voice there. Cheeky. So tell us a bit more about the values that are right or wrong.
Yes, and then we also kind of, we found an overlap between reputation and values as well.
Okay.
So we came across that as we were having the discussion, and and then also something that came up is how, when people have the same values, they tend to steer towards one another and bond because of the similarities and things like that. As I would have to say, sort of like in personal relationships and things, we probably find a lot of that. And then we also felt that maybe in a corporate environment, if you don't share the same values, it could actually become quite a toxic environment as well. you know, which would maybe lead you to leaving, you know, that place of employment. You know, there would be a disjoint.
Yeah, no, I completely, Louise. I mean, it's interesting. We had the same thing in our group. Goodness in our group was talking about how this shared values is so important, and that's one of the things we know from a psychological perspective. One of the key drivers in any relationship, if that's a personal relationship or a relationship between an individual and an organization, shared values is one of the most important drivers of commitment in that relationship, and it is something which is critically important. So I'm going to pick up some of your thinking and also some of the thinking in our group, and just, you know, unpack, you know, values are deeply held beliefs. They're different from the beliefs. I'm in the UK at the moment, and I'm just looking to my left, and I can say, well, you might try to tell me the sky is a grayish blue or a bluish gray. Okay, it could be either. That's a belief that I can shift quite easily. A value is a deeply held belief, and values are things that we hold very, very close to us. They are things which we've developed from a very young age. Again, you know, Goodness in our group spoke about how values are developed through our childhood, or are often very, very unconscious. And they're deeply held beliefs. Now, I think they do guide behavior. Values guide behavior. So that's the other thing I think which is very important to make this link on, is that values are one of the key drivers of behavior. If we want to understand behaviors, we need to understand values. So this link back to reputation, if our reputations are formed by you know, people's experiences of us, and their experiences of us are driven by our behaviors reflect our values, right? So that's how this link. And I think the values are the things which are often unseen and are often, you know, even not tangible, or not even known to ourselves until we're tested. So I did some teaching a while ago, again at London Business School, and I taught with a professor, a guy called Ralph Stacey, who's another South African professor. And I used to love him, watch him do his session on values, because, you know, he had such it was always different because there were different people in the room. But here's one of his definitions of values, and I think this is really interesting. He talks about, you know, values as being the things that we couldn't compromise without being physically sick, right? So values are, in that sense, deeply held inside us, and are the things that might stop us from doing things. Okay, so we might not do certain things because they are against our values. We often don't know what our values are until we're tested. You know, and I think we don't know that we're tested until we're in these very difficult situations. I was recently doing a presentation with someone from the armed forces, and they were saying, actually, you know, we're never sure of, you know, our soldiers or our military until they've actually been out in the field, because, you know, it's only when you're out in the field that you might know, I value my own safety more than I value, you know, my queen and country. Now, to me, neither is right or wrong. And I think that's the key thing about values, is we could judge them right or wrong from our worldview, or what we might think is important. And one might be more right for the army than it might be for a different business or a different organization. But values are often only transparent when we're tested. And that's why it's important to be tested in safe ways. And I think that's part of what we try to do on the Henley MBA, and some part of what we do with, you know, I know John Foster Pedley is very keen on immersion learning, on you know, taking people out of their comfort zone and getting them to, you know, work in different places and reflect on who they are. And I think it's only when you leave your country that you actually feel those tests. And I think those tests are important to understanding who we are. So on one level, values stop us from doing things. On another level, values drive us towards doing things. Okay. So, you know, if I think of myself as a person, you know, I think, you know, and I think we all are, I'll just talk about myself. I think, you know, by their natures, values are often contested, and individuals, you know, we've been working with our neuroscience department for a number of years now. The more we work with them, the more we realize is that, you know, human beings are systems of conflict. We're conflicted. On one level, I want to be super fit and super healthy, and on another level, I want to have some fun, which might also include eating lots of nice food. So even within that, there's this conflict between, you know, things that I want to do and things I don't want to do. And unpacking and understanding those conflicts, I think, is key. We had someone else who spoke, I think it was Molly in our group, who spoke about authenticity. And to me, I think authenticity is, you know, is a really important value, but I think it's something that we always are working towards. I think we're working towards authenticity. We're working towards managing these conflicts between, you know, doing things that we want to do and not doing things. I think another definition of values, which I think are really important, is that, you know, values are, you know, there because they define behaviors in complex and conflicted situations. So we often don't, you know, we have values in organizations because they help us to guide behaviors in difficult situations. If we could write everything down about how we should behave, then we wouldn't necessarily need values. So if you think about values, then you know, values lead to behaviors, then behaviors lead to a set of norms, and norms lead to a culture. And I think that's the link between values and culture. And often what we need to recognize is that the cultures that we've got are often formed around, you know, key events in society, key traumas in our society, which set the values. We've not set the values, set the norms. And some of those norms don't necessarily serve us. So, you know, I'll give you another little example. You know, I was brought up to you know, let's eat all my food, and it's rude not to eat your food. And you know, still to this day, if someone serves me up a big plate of food, I'll eat it because it's rude not to. And I think actually, you know, on one level, I shouldn't be eating all my food because I probably should, you know, watch my weight and make sure that I'm the right, you know, healthier. But, you know, if I trace that back, where did that come from? It's probably got something to do with, you know, the fact that my grandfather was in the Second World War. You know, my granny was, you know, saving, trying to make, you know, food work. And out of that comes this rule, comes this trauma. And then the culture continues, even though the trauma isn't there anymore. And I think, you know, as a society, South Africa also, you know, any society is these norms are often based around traumas, which are either closer in our history or further in our history. And I think the advantage South Africa has is that the trauma is closer. So you can still think about how the culture should be or could be. I think, you know, sometimes in the UK, the trauma is perhaps further in the distance, and often is referred to things like the Second World War. So thinking through this link between values and behaviors, norms, and cultures is important. And I think, you know, the other thing to recognize, as I said, is that, you know, if you look at this Schwartz wheel over here, that values are often in conflict. So you have, if you like, on, you know, as you look at the screen, the top left-hand side of the screen, you know, some people valuing openness to change. And on the bottom right-hand, conservatism, you know, keeping things the same. And you'll see that in politics all the time. Hey, we want to keep the pearl, we want to be conservative, we want change. There's a big, you know, conflict between the two, and some people valuing more the conservative side, some people valuing more the change side. And then you'll see the other aspects on the wheel is that, you know, you've got this one aspect, your top right-hand corner, self-transcendence, you know, kindness, universalism, putting the others first, versus enhancement, self-achievement. And again, you'll see that, you know, in society, in terms of, you know, do we want to make more money, or do we want to be, you know, kinder to the environment? How do we balance these things? And I think for me, the recognition, I think that's the key thing here, is that we're all conflicted, and making sense of the conflicts is important, as opposed to this idea that, hey, we're all completely synergistic and our values just work together. Well, values by their nature are in conflict, and understanding how we make sense of those conflicts becomes important. And that's, probably, just looking at the time where I just wanted to finish with a final example of that in the corporate world, because I asked you to think about corporate values. There's a company here with 3 values: safety, quality, and volume. And the reason I throw up this example is because it's a company everyone knows very well in South Africa, especially, a company called Toyota. And the reason I put up these values is because, Toyota, over the last sort of 6, 7, 8 years, has had a series of safety and quality issues, particularly in the American market. And, they've had a series of issues with braking systems, and, challenging how these braking systems might have even caused, the death of passengers. And, you've got someone, Mr. Toyota, who was, from a communal culture, a Japanese culture, some people might say a shame-based culture, who don't like to be criticized in public as much as, who does, but not as much. They were put under pressure to explain some of these instances of why is Toyota, a company with the most outstanding reputation, tarnishing that reputation with products that maybe don't have the right safety or the right quality. And the way Mr. Toyota explained it, I thought is a beautiful example of how corporate values can influence behaviors. And what he said, and you can Google it if you like this, he was called in front of a congressional hearing in the United States. There are a number of videos of the congressional hearing. And, he was asked to explain this. And, essentially what he said was that, Toyota had become a great company by following these 3 values, by following safety, quality, and volume. And these values defined behaviors in the company. So if there was a problem on the production line and it compromised safety, they'd stop production. If they were going to give an Employee of the Month award, it would be, the employee with the highest quality and the least defects. So all of the internal processes were aligned with these values, and the values had a hierarchy: safety, quality, and volume. Safety number 1, quality number 2, and volume. You might ask, well, is volume a value? Well, volume was about, making the most cars, being the biggest, being the best. And that was what defined Toyota as an amazing company. What Mr. Toyota said is that, over the period of years, between having these values, is the safety issues they had, quality issues they had, was because their values got mixed up. So the real values in Toyota were no longer safety, quality, and volume. Actually, they were valuing wanting to be, had a strategic goal to be the biggest, most, car manufacturer in the world. And that value was driving behavior. And so if there was a problem on the production line and a compromised volume, don't stop production. You've got a choice between providers who can provide you components for braking systems, or any other aspects of the car. You've got a choice between the one who can provide you the right quality, or the one that can get you the right volume 24/7 anywhere in the world. You choose the one that can get you the right volume. So a whole series of if you like, changes to the behaviors. And oh, by the way, Employee of the Month, the person with the highest output. So you have a whole series of changes to the behaviors, because you've changed the hierarchy of the values. And that's not even changing the values, it's just changing which value is the most important. The other thing which, I didn't want to believe, but is very strong in the evidence now, is that, corporate values define behaviors often more than personal values in organizations. I wanted to believe, I had free choice, but, it seems very clear that corporate values are very strong in driving and changing behavior. And here's the mechanism by which it works. If you think of Toyota as an organization that historically, was on Kaizen and, continuous improvement and safety, quality, volume, you have those set of employees who believe in that. And if Toyota start to change to have volume first, some of those people leave. Okay, so they leave the organization, they don't share the values anymore. And then you create a new normal where it's volume number 1 and, focusing on production, and you reward people for those behaviors. You create a new culture, and often you can create a toxic culture that is successful for a short period of time, but then breaks down. So this idea that values aren't important is to my mind just not true. It's values in organizations are hugely important to the aspect where it's not just the 3 values, but how do those 3 values work together, and which are the most important values? The big mistake I see in companies is often companies are having a list of 20 values. You know, I know we did some work with our Financial Conduct Authority here in the UK to look at how they were working. And, you know, I looked at, they had a set of, you know, something like 10 values for themselves and then 10 principles for how they regulate others. And I was thinking, well, our short-term memories have a, you know, span of 5 plus or minus 2 things, so we can keep about 7 to 9 things in our mind at one time, and here you're trying to balance 20 things. It's very difficult. So having a smaller set of values and working out how they work together is key to driving behavior in organizations. So I'm aware of time, so I just wanted to finish off just on this notion of values, just a reflection of, you know, values, you know, can be in conflict and are likely to be in conflict. They do have a hierarchy and they do define behavior. Values are important in as far as they define behavior. And if our behaviors are influencing our reputations, our values influence our behaviors influence our reputation, and our reputation then influence how people behave back towards us. And I think, you know, when we think about reputation, what we're really interested in doing is understanding ourselves better, understanding our identities better as individuals and organizations, and then understanding how we relate to society better and how people relate back to us. So it's if you go back to this process, this is, if you like, you know, the whole way in which we would look at the module of saying that actually, you know, this idea of looking at an issue, looking at ourselves in terms of our values, how far are we stakeholder led, values led, what are the gaps, and what should we do? And then you'll see this is a circle. It's a never ending loop, because, you know, when we do something, the world changes and we have to make sure that we keep up with the world. So it's a never ending subject of us, you know, keeping up to date with the world in relation to issues. And you know, I guess as we've all seen with COVID, you know, this will change, the context changes, and then we have to think, well, what do our values mean for behaving within COVID, and what do our stakeholders want, and how do we engage with that? So it's a never-ending process, which is good in some ways, because I'm never, hopefully short of opportunities to make engagements with organizations. And it's yeah, so I'm going to finish there. Those are my key points. I'm just aware of time, and I realize I'm a little bit over. So I was going to stop sharing my screen. I think I've stopped sharing. Let me just double check. I have stopped sharing, I think. And I was going to, I know Luis is here, so I'm also very happy for Luis to moderate the questions, but we did chat about this before, and he said, Kevin, you're more than capable of moderating your own questions. So, and I think he's right. So anyone's got questions or comments for me, reflections on the session? It's been a bit of a whirlwind. As you can see, the sun has been rising behind me. You've had me from night into day. So I hope it's made some sense. Any questions or thoughts? Thank you, Annette. That's a nice comment. Thank you.
All right, cool. I think, Kevin, just a question for myself, and then we'll look at other questions that guys have. But thank you so much for that session. It almost kind of feels new. It's amazing how much I missed in that class, because all you ever look for is, what do I need to pass? So here's one for me. Because we are, you know, we're talking about job reset. So some of the guys that are in here, and maybe some people that you're going to meet along the way, are probably looking either for a new thing, or, you know, especially because of, you know, what COVID has done right now with, you know, with many managers actually being laid off, never mind just, you know, just your normal staff. So here's the thing. So if I come across a company that I believe that, you know, is going to pay me good money, but I kind of know that their values are not necessarily aligned to mine. Should I take that job? How do you think that's going to affect, affect my time working for that company? So for instance, Okay, cool. Well, I won't make an example, but I think you understand my
Yeah.
question.
No, I think I'll answer your question in a slightly different way. So, I mean, I think my experience of this is probably a little bit from the other side, you know, talking to my friends in corporate organizations who are recruiting, right? And one of the things that they tell me is that, you know, people often come with their own agenda, or they come with what they want. And often their view is that they haven't spent enough time really exploring the company values. What do they really mean? What could they mean? And I think if you spend time really exploring that, that is something which I think is then the foundation of a really good discussion in an interview, right? I think because we might come to it, and you know, we all have different ways of understanding the same values. So I might understand safety very differently from Toyota or from you, all right? And we might think that our values are different. So I would say, go in, explore. What does this mean to you? What does the company say that it means? And explore that with them, as opposed to, I think, saying, hey, I'm sure that their values aren't the same as mine, because often we find that we presume, we come from our own perspective. So I would say spend that extra time really trying to understand the perspective of the other, and then come in with that view, because that view might be surprising to the organization. So I give you another example. I do a lot of work with Shell, the big multinational oil company, and I was just talking to Bjorn Edlund, who, you know, used up until recently was their head of global communications. And, you know, my experience of an organization like Shell is that they actually spend a lot of time working things out, thinking things through, and then they will come and present the world with an answer. And the world doesn't like the answer, but the world hasn't seen the working out, right? So we might presume Shell has a certain set of values, and which might be, in our view, arrogant or too big or too strong. Actually, what they're valuing is excellence. What they're valuing is being experts, being technically good, but they're not very good at explaining it. So I think some of those companies might appreciate the feedback. You might not get the job, but I think, you know, and then to answer your question more directly, if you really feel at the end of it that having that job is going to compromise your values, you know, go back to the definition. You know, if you have to compromise your values, you're going to feel physically sick. It's called cognitive dissonance. There's a mismatch between who I am and what I've got to do. It's going to make you sick. Don't do it, right? It's going to be, and so that's where I would say, if that's where you really get to.
Okay. And then can I ever fire someone just based on the fact that what they've done, or who, you know, like their values are not aligned with that of the company?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting, you know, we had a discussion. The guy from the Brooklyn Bridge, I think it was the Brooklyn Bridge in our breakout group, was talking about how his organization had changed its behaviors, you know, based on the values that it's got. And I think, you know, where I've seen this stuff really working is where values are embedded within the reward structures, within the promotion structures, within the disciplinary structures of an organization. So, hey, you can't get promoted just by having your financial numbers right. You've got to have your stakeholder value numbers right, your values right. And I think, you know, I would say that, you know, it's not necessarily, I don't think you could ever be fired for your values, because values are something that we hold and are dear to us. They're personal. You know, I personally think, you know, there's nothing that's necessarily right or wrong there. But what you could be fired for is if your behaviors were out of touch with the demands of what society believes is a good value. So I think if your behaviors weren't in line with the values, that is something which you could be disciplined for. So I think that what we try to do in the workshop, and what we haven't done here, is help organizations think through how they can turn their values into a set of behavioral standards, right? And, you know, with those behavioral standards, we have to be aware that those behavioral standards are also cultural. So I spoke about, you know, Toyota and Japan. I also, you know, I do a lot of, you know, teaching, you know, for students from all over the world. And I know that when you're dealing with a communal culture like a Japan or a China, you know, they are less, you know, if you, let's say, for example, value something like honesty, you know, in that culture, it's very difficult to challenge a professor in class or to be disagreed with. So that's not being dishonest. It's just, you know, almost like valuing that elder or that respect figure. So we have to recognize that different behaviors might represent the same values in different cultures. I might show you respect right now, Louisa, by disagreeing with you and saying, hey, I don't agree with you right now. I respect you, but because if I wasn't being honest with you, I have the feeling that that would be disrespectful. But if I was in a different culture, I perhaps would disagree with you, but not just in front of 25 other people that we've never met before, right? I might take you to a private room and say, hey, Louisa, let's talk, you and me, not in front of everyone else, right? So we need to recognize that behavioral standards can be different in different cultures. And that's one of the big things that corporates, multinationals need to work through. How do they create a set of behavioral standards that represent their values in different cultures?
Okay, so last question, and this one may be a bit, a bit touchy for me, but if anyone has any questions, please just put them onto the chat. I'll just read them out, and I'll ask Kevin. I promise you it won't be any much longer. Just after this, Leonard is going to come on. Leonard is the head of MBA, and she's going to speak about just the enrollment process, so that for those of you who are interested to enroll, if you haven't enrolled, you can at least just know how. So here's my question, right? I think we're living at a time where, the beliefs, you think that after so many years of people having been on earth, that they'll get a way to sort of kind of understand each other's values and be able to live in peace and harmony. But somehow it's sort of like it is those values that are separating us. So whether, was it going to be Trump, was it going to be Biden? And obviously I'm just talking about America specifically, because we've seen such a great divide there. Is it going to be all lives matter? Is it going to be Black Lives Matter? I mean, frankly, as far as I think, I'm like, whatever you believe in, just kind of go for it. But there needs to come but I mean, I guess just speaking about one individually, when is it a good time to express your values, or rather, when are values bad?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. And I think, for me, I think, we're living in a world in which, we've seen the rise of identity politics. And then you have to step back and say, hey, what does that mean? Some people call it populism. Some people call it identity. I prefer populism is just something which is popular. I prefer to take a step back and think, what is identity politics? And identity politics is we all have the ability for good and bad, right? That's for sure. And identity politics is about saying, I can define myself in terms of who I am not. Right. So it's almost like, when Khrushchev met Kennedy during the Cold War, what he said to him is, the bigger this Cold War becomes, the tighter the knot that binds the United States and, what was then, the USSR. And what he was saying was, I can only be good because you're bad, and you can only be good because I'm bad. And I think the trap of identity politics, the way around it is, if we're sucked into this thing of, whatever you think of Trump, I think, as soon as you hate Trump, he's won, because he's created a polarization. He's created a you and us, a them and us. And I think when you are in a them and us situation, the key thing to do is to look for things that we have, genuine things that we have in common that are bigger than the things that divide us. Because as soon as we start to focus on the things that we divide us, we define ourselves in terms of who we're not. And then we lose track of who we are. We then are only something because someone else is bad. Right? We lose track of our goodness. So I think, for me, I'll give you a little example. Way back to the year 2000, I came back. I was originally from South Africa, and I came back to South Africa to do some work. And I work for an organization called NICRO, which is National Institute of Crime Prevention and Reintegration of Offenders. It's an NGO trying to, rehabilitate and work with offenders. And I remember just sitting there and, as part of working there, I had to fill in a little form. And, the form asked me about my, race. And it was, white African, Black African, colored African. I was like, wow, on this form, this notion of being African is bigger than being Black or white or colored, right? So there's a mission, or is there a notion of being a person? And that's, I think, if we want to overcome this, it's very seductive to get sucked into, I am this because you are, I'm not you. We can all do that. We all have the ability for prejudice. We all have the ability for bias. But I think the way around it is to find a way to have something that you can respect someone on. and to work from there. Because ultimately, I believe, you know, we are all good at our core, and from finding those senses of connection, we can move forward. Because if we're going to only fight, we're going to end up, you know, in this negative, I define myself in terms of who I'm not, and that's quite seductive, and recognizing that we're all capable of that. So I think for me, that's where I would start. And it's not to say that you should compromise what you believe in. You know, I might completely disagree with what Trump was doing, but if I'm going to just demonize him, he can demonize me, and we're going to just spiral downwards, as opposed to I can find something to respect him on, or connect with him or his followers on, and work from there. And I think that's more and more important the bigger these groups become, because you can't tell me, you know, 50% of the United States are good and 50% are bad, right? That's just not the way that it is. You know, there's a lot of good people there, and I think you know, we need to work in that way. So that would be my starting point. Try to love them even if you don't like them, right? Yeah. Try to start from a position of love.
Yeah. No, Kevin, thank you so much. I know that you've also got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old.
Yeah, I know. Who want daddy back. What's daddy doing in the loft? I've heard them a few times, kicking around, causing chaos. And what are you doing? So anyway.
Yeah, I had my 2-year-old come in here and nearly caused chaos as well. This was about to come to an end, this session for me.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. But I love that. You know, I think really all of us have different values. And although, you know, the company may have its values, which kind of brings us together, at the end of the day, if we don't actually learn how to respect each other's individual values, we won't be able to act as a group. So I guess, I mean, like as a team. So understanding where all of us are coming from, acting in love for your brother, for your sister, is gonna, you know, that's gonna be the ingredient that's gonna make us successful in whatever it is that we're coming to. But thank you so much for taking your time, and hopefully for all those prospective students who are gonna do the MBA in the next few months or even next year, that they're going to get the opportunity to sit with you. But this is you know what, it's a great class. It's a great module that you designed. You played a big role in designing this, and I believe that some of those models you kind of came up with as well. I know that you showed a few of them here, and absolutely awesome. Probably the one module that I definitely still use today, and not to show other people, but just to understand others, and like we spoke yesterday, to just kind of understand as well my company and the direction we should take. You know.
Brilliant. Thank you, Louis. So that's great to hear. So, and thank you. I'm going to leave soon because, like I said, I can hear big feet running up and down the stairs leaving. And Mama is not, you know, Mama's been working since 6 o'clock this morning. You know, she's got a little team. I got up at 6, and so I was with them. So yeah, she's 3 hours into her working day. So I need to get down there and help. So
no, thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you for your time. We're gonna go over to Lyneth now. I think Lyneth is here just to get her video on. Lyneth is going to speak to us about the enrollment, and you guys have got to meet Lyneth. Okay, she's absolutely awesome. So even if you are there, just stay so we can just hear from Lyneth. Hello, Lyneth.
Hello, Loiso. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the session today. So as Loiso has said, I'm Leonard Zungu, the head of department for MBA, looking after the delivery of the program. And as a team, I think our goal is to ensure that our students have the best experience on the MBA. So from the first day you start on the program until you are able to graduate. So we are really passionate about what we do and just supporting our students progress and ensure that you actually get the degree at the end of the day. So I just want to quickly go over the application process. It won't be long. I understand that we sort of over time already. Just also again, thanking everyone. Thank you, Loiso, for hosting the session. And thank you to Kevin for a very insightful session. And to our participants who have stayed up until this far. I hope you enjoyed the class. And I note from the list of participants that we have a few of our current students. I don't want to mention names, but I appreciate that you could be part of the session and that you continue your learning journey with Henley. As already said, I understand that, as Loyiso has already said, sorry, some of our participants that are attending here are hoping to enroll for the MBA, or you're thinking about it. So this can be a decision that you've already made or something that you're thinking about for the future. But I hope that you can consider the MBA as your program of choice. And this could be the beginning of an incredible journey of learning and growth. And we hope that it will be continuous and lifelong. So just on the applications, we are still open for applications. We have 5 intakes in 2021, 2 intakes that are starting in March. So this is in the next month, 2 intakes that are starting in May, and again, an intake starting in June. So in order to apply, you will need a postgraduate diploma or an NQF level 8 qualification, or an equivalent qualification, which is NQF level 8, with 3 years management experience. So please note that our application forms can be downloaded from our website, or a member of the Henley team can email the documents to you. So you will be required to complete the application form and submit it with the relevant documents. So this is a copy of your transcript, your qualification, so your certificate, a copy of your certificate as well, and a copy of your ID. There is a team of experienced business development officers and our admissions team who will assist you in just checking that all the relevant documents have been submitted. And what follows next basically is that the applications is screened in South Africa and vetted again by our UK admissions team for final approval. So the application process takes about 3 weeks, and after that you will be notified of a decision. So the wait is not long. We don't have an application closing date. So I would like to emphasize that we are still open. If you can't make the March intake, you can always enroll for a May intake or for a June intake. And if you apply again this year, the application basically, the offer stands for a year, and you can join also again in 2022, just as an example. But yeah, please complete the forms submitted. There is a team of experienced personnel to assist you with checking that everything is there and it's correct. We just basically want to ensure that you will have a good opportunity of getting a good decision. Basically, the outcome must be that you will start on one of our programs soon. So again, as I've mentioned, our applications, our admissions team can assist. We currently hosting MBA application workshops. We've got Elsa Stewart-Smith, Dr. Elsa Stewart-Smith, who is running our academic writing center, who actually takes time out. If you need the one-on-one assistant to complete your personal statement, as an example, or a management summary, she is available to assist and have a one-on-one session with our prospective students. So that help is available if you feel that you need assistance with filling out the form. So please reach out to us. We are available on social media. We are available by phone or by email. I can be contacted. I'll share my details on the chat. And I am also joined by my colleague Yusuf, who also will share his details, just so you can contact us if you would like to do the Henley MBA. And just also on that, we've got the next MBA info session. I don't want to take away from your learnings from today. So we've got an info session coming up on the 11th of February. If you want to join us for that session, please enroll and register on our website. So that you can just get more info. Again, if you need to contact one of us and have a personal talk, that also is available, but there is an info session that's available where we go through the program in detail, the structure of the program, what is available for you in terms of the different finance option. So that is taking place on the 11th of February. Please register on our website. So just once again, I would like to thank you all for your participation today and for joining the session. Thank you again, Loyiso. And also thank you to our Dean and Director. Thank you, John. I know that you've got a busy schedule. It's really appreciated that you are part of the sessions and you are available for our participants. Yeah, thank you, everybody. It's great that we could all come together on this Saturday to join and enjoy the session. Thank you, Loyiso. So that's it from me. If I am available, I will stay on. if any of our participants would like to ask questions. I don't want to keep everybody here, but if you want to ask a question, we are available to assist. Thank you.
Great stuff. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Leonard, for just all that info. I see Yusuf has got, he's put down his email address over there, yusufe@henleysa.ac.za. He's got his number there as well. So if you just go to the chat, make sure that you get those details and give Yusuf a call. Otherwise, everything that Leonard has just said is true. I'll not argue it. Thank you also, John, just for your time as well. I mean, once again, just to kind of show the person that John is. I think if I was the dean, I would have come on, said my hellos, and then went to go have my tea with my son Ayanda. But here you are, John. You stayed on. Thank you.
Oh, I love it, and thank you very much, Louisa. It's fabulous. You know, an alumnus, and you're teaching and you're helping. It's amazing how the people do the MBA and then build their career. And now we've got people going on to doctorates, and you know, it's wonderful to see your program. Thank you so much, Leonard. Leonard has recently been made the permanent head of the MBA, not department, program, the whole thing. She's grown up through the ranks, done fantastic work, and that's part of us. And we're here for you to help you in any which way you can. As I said earlier, our job is to serve you and make you successful. That's what we're all about. We believe in you, and we'd love to help. So thank you very much, everyone. Over to you, Louisa.
Thank you, John, and congratulations to you as well, Leonard. Leonard was my group member during my MBA at Henley, and here she is, head of MBA. Listen, nothing is impossible. We speak about job reset. This is what you've got to do in order to make sure that happens. But otherwise, thank you, everyone. I believe that Leonard is going to stay behind to answer any of your questions that you have. And I guess once again, coming back to what Henley stands for, you know, building the people who build the businesses who build Africa. We love you all. Hope you guys enjoyed the session. Please go onto social media, follow Henley SA. Make sure that you become part of the family, and we'll see you guys soon. And hopefully in the next years to come, it's going to be on campus as well. Whether you're an alumni, whether you're a current student, or you're just kind of coming to say hi. Thank you to all, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Leonard, good morning.
Hi, Sibulelo.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
I'm good. Leonard, I just have one issue. I spoke to is it Tabi? Is it Lindo Klimba on Thursday,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I am struggling to get my transcript for my undergrad. I've went to the varsity. They've sent me through to the QVC website. I registered on Monday already, but I'm unable. I'm not getting the activation email, right? I've contacted them. I'm unable to activate the account so that I can get the transcript. I don't know if that's the only thing that's delaying me now for my application.
So you can actually proceed. You can submit your application as long as we've got, if you can't get the transcript, we just need a certified copy of the degree certificate itself.
Yes, that I have, okay.
The transcript, we understand that actually a lot of the institutions in SA sometimes do delay. So please submit all the documents, even if you don't have the transcript. So we'll process it for you.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you.
Forwarded to myself or Yusuf. My email is available on the chat.
Yeah,
and we'll just make sure that. Do you want to join which intake are you aiming for?
I'm aiming for May intake.
Okay, all right. So there's still a bit of time, but please forward it so that we can process it and get a decision for you.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, so we'll try to get that application forms to us as soon as you can, because it normally takes a month for us to process the application and then give you an acceptance. So rather early than late, you know, if you want to get into the first intake in May.
Okay, I'll send it to you then. I have all the documents, just the transcripts outstanding. I'll send it to you.
100%.
Thank you guys. Cheers.
Bye. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.